The battle raged above the alien planet like a deadly dance, laser fire streaking across the dark sky as ships from two warring factions collided in an epic clash. Among the chaos, a single vessel, damaged and shuddering from the impact of a missile, plummeted toward the surface. A lone escape pod ejected just in time, its sleek shape cutting through the atmosphere, heat scorching the air as it sped toward the ground. On board, a woman, an alien warrior, struggled to stay conscious. Her breathing was shallow, her body battered from the impact, and blood pooled around her in the cramped pod. She had been a commander, a leader of her people's forces, but now, alone and injured, she was nothing more than a survivor. Her once proud armor, now cracked and scorched, was little protection against the harsh environment of the unknown planet she was about to crash onto. The pod slammed into the ground with a deafening crash, throwing her body violently against the harness. Her vision blurred, and for a moment everything faded to black. When she woke, she was lying on the cold, hard ground, the pod's hatch torn open by the crash, the sky above her dark and unfamiliar. The air smelled strange, unlike anything she had known. She groaned, trying to move, but pain shot through her body like 1,000 needles, and she collapsed back to the dirt. She had to move. She had to survive. But everything inside her ached, and as the world around her seemed to spin, she realized she might not make it. Far above, the human soldier Sergeant John Walker was on his own mission. His transport ship had crashed after being struck by enemy fire, and now he was stranded on this unfamiliar world. With only a small survival kit, he had no choice but to navigate through the dense, alien jungle, hoping to find a way to send a distress signal. Walker was no stranger to tough situations. He'd been in wars, fought countless battles, and survived against all odds. But nothing had prepared him for the landscape he now found himself in. The air was thick with humidity, the ground slippery beneath his boots, and every sound in the jungle seemed to come from a creature he couldn't see. It was a beautiful yet terrifying world, and Walker knew he couldn't afford to be caught off guard. He had been walking for hours when he stumbled upon something unexpected, a wreckage. The twisted metal of what looked like an alien ship lay scattered across the clearing, its hull torn apart by fire and explosion. He approached cautiously, his rifle at the ready, scanning for any signs of life. Then he saw her. The alien woman lay motionless near the wreckage, her body twisted at an unnatural angle. Blood stained the ground beneath her, and her breathing was weak, barely perceptible. For a moment, Walker hesitated. She was an alien, an enemy soldier. He had been trained to fight people like her, to see them as nothing more than targets. But the way she lay there, helpless, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths, stirred something inside him. She was just a soldier too, just like him, caught in a war that neither of them had started. He stepped forward cautiously, lowering his rifle. She didn't move, didn't react, and for a brief second he wondered if she was already dead. But then he noticed the faintest twitch of her fingers, a sign of life. Without thinking, Walker knelt beside her, his heart pounding. He checked for signs of vital signs. Her pulse was weak, but still there. Her wounds were severe, and without medical equipment, he doubted she would survive long. His mind raced, weighing the options. He could leave her here, let her die alone, and continue his mission. But something about her made him hesitate. He couldn't leave her. Pulling off his combat vest, Walker wrapped it around her to try and stem the bleeding. He had to act fast. Her survival depended on it. He gently lifted her up, cradling her in his arms. Her alien form was much smaller than his own, but her body felt like dead weight, limp and unresponsive. She stirred in his arms, her eyes flickering open for just a moment, but the alien language that spilled from her lips was incomprehensible to him. Her gaze was sharp, and despite her injury, there was a fire in her eyes. She was a warrior, no doubt about it, but now she was a wounded one. "Easy," Walker muttered under his breath, trying to soothe her as he began to carry her through the dense jungle. He had no idea how long it would take to find shelter or any form of help, but he couldn't leave her. He didn't know why, but it was as if something inside him wouldn't let him. The alien jungle was relentless. The thick foliage seemed to close in around him, and every step he took felt like it took twice the effort. He pushed forward, finding a small clearing where he could rest. He knew it wasn't safe to stay in one place for too long, but there were no other options. He needed to tend to her wounds and figure out what to do next. Walker set her down gently on a bed of leaves and sticks, scanning the area for threats. The woman's breathing was labored, and her wounds were still bleeding, but he couldn't leave her unattended for even a moment. His hands worked quickly as he began to clean her injuries as best as he could with the limited supplies at his disposal. She didn't resist, but her eyes remained wide open, watching him closely. He couldn't understand what she was thinking, but there was something in her gaze, a mix of confusion, fear, and maybe even a hint of gratitude. She hadn't asked for his help, and yet here he was, saving her life against all logic. The woman's alien features were sharp and striking, slender, with skin that shimmered faintly in the dim light of the jungle. Her hair was a deep, almost iridescent black, and her eyes, though wild with pain, held a certain intensity that Walker couldn't look away from. She wasn't just a soldier. She was someone who had lived through unimaginable pain and loss just like him. "Stay with me," Walker said softly, though he didn't know if she could understand. His voice was hoarse, worn out from hours of constant motion, but he needed her to stay alive. He checked his surroundings again, always aware of the dangers lurking just beyond his sight. The sounds of the jungle were louder now, filled with unfamiliar creatures. Walker knew he wasn't safe here for long, but he had to make sure she survived. He'd made his choice. He couldn't leave her, not when she was this close to death. As the night fell, the air grew colder and the alien woman's breathing grew slower. Walker remained by her side, watching over her as the hours passed, unsure of what the future held. He didn't know if he had just made a grave mistake by saving her life, or if he had made the right decision. But for now, it didn't matter. He had made his choice, and that was enough. The first rays of light broke through the dense jungle canopy, and Walker knew he had to move. The woman still hadn't woken up, but he couldn't stay in one place for too long. He gently lifted her once more, his muscles aching from the effort, and began to move deeper into the jungle, praying that he would find shelter, or at the very least, a way off this alien planet. He had no idea what he was getting into. But one thing was certain. This was just the beginning. The jungle was dense, its air thick with humidity and the scent of unfamiliar plants. Every step Walker took was harder than the last, his boots slipping on the slippery ground as he carried the injured alien woman. Her body, though light in comparison to his, felt heavier with each passing minute, the strain on his muscles increasing. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. His mind raced as he moved through the thick foliage. He had no idea where he was going, no map to guide him. His priority was to find shelter, somewhere safe where he could treat her wounds properly. The jungle was alive with sounds, strange calls and rustlings from unseen creatures. It was a world that felt both beautiful and terrifying, like a predator patiently waiting to pounce. Walker kept his eyes sharp, scanning the trees above and the underbrush below. He wasn't sure what dangers lurked here, but he knew that staying still wasn't an option. Every instinct in his body told him to keep moving. He had no idea if any other alien factions were nearby, but he couldn't take the risk of being caught off guard. The woman in his arms stirred slightly, her breathing shallow but steady. She had been unconscious for hours, and Walker had begun to fear that she might not wake up at all. He wasn't a medic, just a soldier, but he knew enough to stop the bleeding and clean her wounds. Still, there was a part of him that worried she might not survive. The alien species she belonged to was unfamiliar to him, and without knowing what kind of medical treatment she needed, it felt like a gamble. He looked down at her, her face pale under the alien skin, the sharp lines of her features softened in unconsciousness. She was beautiful in a way that was alien to him, and for a moment he let himself wonder what her life had been like before the crash. Was she a warrior by choice, or had she been forced into battle? Was she like him, just another soldier following orders without ever questioning them? His thoughts were interrupted as she groaned softly, her eyes fluttering open. She blinked several times, her pupils dilating as if trying to focus on him. Her alien eyes were sharp, almost glowing in the dim light of the jungle. "You're awake," Walker murmured, his voice barely a whisper. He had no idea if she understood him, but he said it anyway. There was something about her gaze that made him think she was aware of what was happening around her, even if she couldn't speak. Her lips parted, and she let out a series of harsh, guttural sounds, the alien language flowing from her like a river of sharp consonants and rolling vowels. Walker didn't understand a word, but he could tell from the intensity in her voice that she was trying to communicate. He shook his head, feeling helpless. He couldn't even begin to guess what she was saying. "Sorry," he said softly, though he knew she wouldn't understand. "I don't know your language." She blinked again, her hand twitching weakly in the air. Walker instinctively took her hand, careful not to hurt her. She didn't pull away, but the slight tension in her fingers told him that she was still processing everything that had happened. She was a fighter. He could tell from the way she carried herself, even in this vulnerable state. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the distant calls of unseen creatures and the steady rhythm of their breathing. Walker's legs were aching, and he knew he had to keep moving. But there was a part of him that didn't want to disturb the silence, didn't want to break the fragile moment between them. Finally, the alien woman spoke again, but this time her voice was quieter, less forceful. It sounded almost like a question. Her eyes met his, searching, as if asking for something he couldn't give her. "You help me?" she asked in broken, simple English. The words were clumsy, but they were clear enough. Walker paused, surprised by her attempt to speak his language. He had expected nothing more than confusion, but this, it caught him off guard. "I didn't have much of a choice," he answered, trying to sound casual. "You were dying. I just did what anyone would do." She said nothing, but her eyes softened for a brief moment, and for the first time since he'd found her, Walker felt a sense of relief. She wasn't hostile, and at least for now, she wasn't trying to kill him. That was progress, right? They continued on in silence, Walker's legs burning with the effort of carrying her. Her weight was starting to feel unbearable, but he couldn't stop. Not now. As they moved deeper into the jungle, the sky above them grew darker, the thick trees blocking out most of the fading sunlight. The temperature dropped, and Walker's breath started to mist in the air. He knew he needed to find shelter before it got too cold. After what felt like an eternity, they stumbled upon a small cave hidden behind a thicket of vines. Walker's heart raced with relief as he spotted the entrance. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to keep them safe for the night. He gently lowered the alien woman to the ground, her weight causing his muscles to protest as he crouched down beside her. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. The exhaustion of the day was starting to catch up with him. His body ached, and his mind was still reeling from the events of the last few hours. He couldn't believe what he had done. Helping an enemy soldier, an alien, wasn't something he would have ever imagined himself doing. But now here they were, alone in the jungle with nothing but each other to rely on. Walker looked at her, watching as she lay there, her breathing slow but steady. She had closed her eyes again, clearly exhausted from everything that had happened. He knew she wasn't out of danger yet. She might be alive for now, but he couldn't be sure how long she'd last without proper care. He took a deep breath and reached into his survival pack, pulling out what little medical supplies he had left. A field bandage, a few antiseptics, and some painkillers. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. As he worked to tend to her wounds, he couldn't help but think about what had brought him here. What was the purpose of all this? Why had he saved her? It didn't make sense. He didn't know anything about her people, or her mission. She was an enemy soldier, someone who had probably fought against humanity in the past. Yet here she was, alive because of him. And despite everything, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. He finished bandaging her wounds as best as he could and sat back, exhaustion settling over him like a heavy cloak. The jungle outside was quiet now, and the night had fully taken over, the only sounds being the occasional rustle of leaves and distant calls of strange creatures. Walker didn't know what the future held. He didn't know if he would ever make it off this planet. But for now, he had made his decision. And as long as she was still breathing, he would keep doing everything he could to protect her. It was a strange thing, saving an enemy. But then again, he was no stranger to strange decisions. And in this world, in this jungle, anything could happen. As he settled down to rest for the night, he couldn't help but wonder, what would happen next? Would this woman, this alien soldier, become an ally, or would she turn on him when she regained her strength? He had no answers. Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. Walker wasn't alone anymore. The following morning, Walker woke to the sounds of distant rustling in the jungle. The air was thick with humidity, and the soft morning light barely filtered through the dense canopy above. His body ached from exhaustion, his muscles sore from carrying the alien woman through the night, but he knew they couldn't stay in the cave for long. The jungle was dangerous, and he didn't trust that they would remain safe for much longer. They had to move again. He glanced over at her. She was still lying there, her wounds bandaged, though she hadn't stirred since he had treated her injuries the night before. She looked peaceful in her sleep, the sharp features of her face softened by unconsciousness. He had never imagined himself in this situation, stuck on an alien planet, taking care of an enemy soldier. But here they were. Walker took a deep breath and sat up slowly, careful not to disturb her. His mind was a swirl of questions and worries, but he knew one thing for certain: he had to keep moving. If they were going to survive, they needed to find a way out of this jungle, back to civilization, or at the very least, to a place where they could get help. But for now, that seemed like a distant dream. As he started to gather his things, his eyes kept drifting back to the alien woman. Her body was small and frail, despite her warrior's stature. She had been so strong in the brief moments she had been awake, but now she looked helpless. Walker's thoughts turned to the war she had fought in, to the battles she must have faced. Was she as much a victim as he was? It seemed impossible to believe, but something in the way she had looked at him, the way she had tried to communicate with him, made him wonder. She stirred suddenly, her eyes fluttering open, and for a moment Walker froze. The last time she had woken up, she had been confused, disoriented. But this time her eyes were sharper, more focused. She glanced around the cave, taking in her surroundings before her gaze landed on him. There was a flicker of recognition, but she didn't speak immediately. "How are you feeling?" Walker asked softly, trying to gauge whether she could understand him now. He wasn't sure if she even remembered that he had helped her the night before. Her voice came out hoarse, barely above a whisper, but her words were clearer than before. "I am alive," she said, her accent thick but understandable. "Thanks for helping." Walker nodded, though his heart skipped a beat at the sound of her voice. It was the first time she had spoken in his language, and though her words were simple, they carried an emotion that hit him harder than he expected. Gratitude, trust. "I couldn't leave you," Walker replied quietly. "You were in no condition to survive out there alone." The alien woman nodded slowly, her eyes scanning him once again, as if trying to piece together who he was. "You are human," she said, her words slow but certain. "I have fought against humans." "I know," Walker replied, his voice tinged with a hint of sadness. "We've fought each other before, but now, we're just two people trying to survive." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The jungle outside seemed to grow louder, the sounds of distant creatures reminding them of the world they were trapped in. The tension in the air was palpable, as though neither of them knew what to say next. Was she going to turn on him? Was she going to try and escape now that she was awake and aware? The questions lingered, but for the moment, they both remained still. Finally, the woman shifted slightly, testing her injured limbs, wincing as she moved. She looked at Walker again, her face a mix of pain and determination. "I am not your enemy," she said. "Not anymore." Walker's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" "You're saying you want to help me." The alien woman closed her eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. "I have no choice. My people. They abandoned me. I was betrayed." Her words hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Betrayal. That word struck a chord in Walker, reminding him of his own struggles, his own losses. He had felt betrayed by his government, by the war he was forced to fight. He didn't know much about her people or her war, but he could relate to that sense of abandonment. "They left me to die," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "After the crash I was alone. I thought I would die, but you saved me." Walker's heart twisted. He had never expected her to say something like that. He had seen her as an enemy, someone to fight, someone to defeat. But now here she was, revealing a vulnerability he hadn't imagined. She wasn't just a soldier. She was someone who had been betrayed just like him. "I'm sorry," Walker said, his voice softer than usual. "I didn't know, but I'm not leaving you here. Not again." The alien woman nodded, her eyes closing for a moment, as if the weight of her words had drained her. When she opened them again, there was something different in her gaze, something like a spark of hope. Walker stood up, pulling his gear together. "We need to move. The jungle isn't a safe place to stay too long. We'll head in that direction," he said, pointing towards what looked like a break in the trees ahead. It wasn't much, but it was better than staying in one place. The alien woman struggled to sit up, her body weak, but she didn't resist when Walker offered her his hand. She took it, her grip firm but unsteady, and with his help she managed to rise to her feet. She swayed slightly, her legs trembling, but she didn't falter. "Thank you," she said again, her voice quieter this time. "You do not have to do this. I am not your friend, but you saved me." Walker looked down at her, his mind full of conflicting thoughts. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know if she would turn on him the moment she regained her strength, or if she would betray him to her people. But for now, he had made his choice. He would help her. He would protect her. "We're in this together," he said, his voice firm. "If we're going to survive, we need to trust each other. No matter who we were before, right now, we're just two people trying to stay alive." The alien woman met his gaze, and for a brief moment there was something in her eyes, a flicker of understanding, of shared humanity. It was fleeting, but it was there. They moved out of the cave together, the jungle once again swallowing them in its dense foliage. Walker kept his eyes peeled for any signs of danger, but for the moment there was a strange sense of calm between them. It was an uneasy peace, but it was something. As they walked, Walker couldn't help but think about what lay ahead. Would they be able to escape the jungle? Could they find a way off this alien planet? Or would the war that had brought them here tear them apart once again? He didn't have the answers, but as long as the alien woman stayed by his side, as long as they could keep each other alive, he wasn't going to give up. Not yet. Together they walked into the unknown, their futures uncertain, but their resolve stronger than ever. The world they were in was vast, and full of dangers they hadn't even begun to comprehend. But for now, they had each other, and that was enough. The days that followed were a blur of constant motion. Walker and the alien woman had no choice but to keep moving through the thick, uncharted jungle. The air grew hotter as they trekked on, sweat dripping from their faces and clothes sticking to their skin. The planet, once so alien to them both, had become their shared prison, a place where survival was their only focus. Walker wasn't sure how long they had been traveling, 2 days, 3. Time had lost its meaning. The jungle was endless, its foliage dense and unwelcoming, with strange noises echoing from all directions. They both moved cautiously, knowing that danger could be waiting just around the corner. The alien woman had become stronger with each passing hour. Her steps were less shaky now, and her breathing had steadied. She still didn't speak much, but there was something different in the way she moved, in the way she looked at him. She was no longer the helpless, injured soldier he had found on the ground. She was becoming a fighter again, but Walker couldn't shake the feeling that the jungle was testing them. Every step they took seemed to lead them deeper into the unknown. The trees were taller here, their roots twisting and sprawling like the fingers of some ancient creature. The air was thick with humidity and every breath felt like a struggle. There was something alive in this jungle, something watching them. They could hear it, soft rustling in the trees, the occasional growl of a predator. At night, they would find shelter in caves or beneath thick tree canopies, making camp in the quiet darkness. Walker kept watch while the alien woman rested, though sleep came rarely to either of them. His mind was always on edge, always alert to the slightest noise or movement. But it wasn't just the jungle that kept him awake. It was the woman beside him, the question of what she truly wanted from him. Was she still an enemy, or had she truly changed? It wasn't until the fourth day that they encountered something that made Walker question everything. They had found a clearing, a rare open space in the dense jungle. The air was cooler here, and for the first time in days, Walker felt like they could catch their breath. He lowered his pack to the ground and let out a sigh of relief. The alien woman, whose name Walker still didn't know, sat down a few feet away. She had become more accustomed to the terrain, but still, her movements were calculated, careful. She looked around the clearing with suspicion, her sharp eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. The jungle had made them both wary. "Do you think we're safe here?" she asked in her broken English, her voice quiet but steady. Walker nodded, though he wasn't entirely convinced. "For now, yeah, but we can't stay in one place for too long. We need to keep moving." The woman's eyes narrowed as she turned her gaze toward him. "You're afraid? You think they'll come for us?" Walker looked at her, surprised. "Who?" "The ones who left me," she replied, her voice hardening. "They will not forget my betrayal. They will hunt me down." Walker felt a chill run down his spine. He had thought about the alien factions she had once served, and what might happen if they found them both. But hearing her say it out loud made the reality of their situation feel all the more dangerous. "We can't worry about that right now," Walker said, trying to sound confident. "We'll handle whatever comes, together." The woman didn't reply immediately. Instead, she stared at the ground, her face unreadable. After a long moment, she looked up at him again. "You don't understand. My people, they don't forgive." Walker clenched his fists, frustrated by her cryptic words. He had no idea what had happened to her before she had crash-landed on this planet, but he knew one thing for certain. If she was telling the truth, then they were both in serious danger. "Then we run," he said firmly. "We keep running until we find a way out of here." Her eyes met his, and there was something in her gaze, something that made Walker pause. She wasn't afraid, not anymore. But there was something else, something deeper in her expression, a weight, a regret. "I never wanted this," she said quietly. "I never wanted to be a weapon." Walker didn't know what to say to that. He had no answers for her, no comforting words to ease her pain. He could only offer her his presence, his trust. For a few minutes they sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, the sounds of the jungle filling the space between them. Then, without warning, a low rumble echoed through the ground. Walker's head snapped up, his heart pounding. The ground trembled beneath them, the trees swaying as if something massive was moving through the jungle. "What the hell is that?" he muttered under his breath. The alien woman stood up immediately, her body tense and alert. "It's them," she said, her voice cold. "They've found us." Before Walker could react, a roar pierced the air, a sound that sent a shiver down his spine. Something was coming for them, something enormous and hungry. "Run!" the alien woman shouted, grabbing his arm and pulling him toward the thick trees. Go. Walker didn't hesitate. He followed her, his legs moving faster than he had thought possible, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The ground shook again, and behind them, something large and terrifying crashed through the jungle. The sounds of snapping trees and crushing foliage were deafening. Whatever it was close. They ran, pushing through the dense underbrush, the jungle thickening around them. Walker's mind raced. What was chasing them? Was it another alien creature? Or was it her people coming to finish what they had started? He didn't have time to think. His only focus was on putting distance between themselves and whatever was hunting them. The woman was leading the way, her movements swift and sure, though Walker could see the strain in her body. She was still recovering from her wounds, but there was no time to rest now. Then with a sudden crash, something massive burst through the trees in front of them, blocking their path. Walker skidded to a halt, heart hammering in his chest. The creature was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its body was covered in thick, reptilian scales, and its eyes glowed with a menacing, otherworldly light. Its claws were sharp and its mouth was filled with rows of razor-sharp teeth. It was a predator, and they were its prey. Without thinking, Walker pulled out his weapon, firing several quick shots at the creature. But the bullets barely slowed it down. The alien woman moved in front of him, her body tense, ready to fight. "This is not our battle," she said, her voice tight with determination. "We need to survive." She darted forward, slashing at the creature with a knife she had somehow managed to retrieve from her wrecked ship. It screeched in pain, but it didn't retreat. It lunged at her with terrifying speed, knocking her to the ground. Walker charged forward without thinking, tackling the creature from behind. He managed to land a few good punches, but it was like fighting a mountain. The creature roared, swinging its claws at him, and Walker barely managed to dodge. The alien woman, though injured, was quick to recover. She grabbed a sharp rock from the ground and drove it into the creature's side. It let out a final, ear-splitting roar before it collapsed, its massive body twitching in its death throes. Breathing heavily, Walker stood over the creature's lifeless body, his heart still racing. The alien woman approached him slowly, her expression unreadable. "Not all battles can be won," she said, her voice calm but filled with an underlying sorrow. "But we live to fight another day." Walker nodded, still processing what had just happened. They had survived, but for how long? The jungle was still full of dangers, and they had no idea what would come next. But in that moment, as they stood together, covered in the creature's blood and grime, Walker realized something important. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about the bond they had formed, a bond that had started with a simple act of kindness, but had become something far more powerful. Together, they would find a way out, and whatever dangers lay ahead, they would face them together. The wounded alien woman was abandoned by everyone. A human soldier picked her up and carried her.